The Hagmann and Hagmann report for today. It's a fabulous Friday edition. It is the 7th day of March 2014. That's March 7th, 2014. This is a live broadcast. My name is Doug Hagmann. With me in studio is my co-host, Joe Hagmann. Together, we are the Hagmann and Hagmann report. Folks, you're about to hear 3 hours of incredible programming, unbiased, uncensored news, information and analysis, information that you need to know in these perilous times in which we live. We're the only show where the news is presented to you in 3D. We look well beyond the headlines, the bylines, and bring you the news behind the news. We're going to have to give you we're going to have to create a 3D glasses, or at least brand some, and send them out to our listeners so they can listen to this broadcast in 3D, perhaps. And for the new listeners, thank you for tuning in. We broadcast each and every weeknight from 8 to 11 p.m. Eastern. On the Internet. Our home base is HomelandSecurityUS.com. That's HomelandSecurityUS.com. And we're also simulcast by the Christians United Broadcasting Network. There, you can tune us in at the Hagmann and HagmannReport.com. For those paying attention, if you go to HomelandSecurityUS.com, if you've been wondering if we are ever going to write anything more again, folks, we are. Just kind of dealing with a lot of issues here. I've got multiple reports and investigative reports that will be coming out on a couple of issues, and they're serious issues, from Ukraine to domestic issues to even the eligibility issues. And you might think that that's a dead discussion, but, well, it's not. It's not because, when everyone was saying, well, let's move on to more important issues, Obama's eligibility, it's just a red herring. It's a ignorant thing to talk about. Those dutiful conservatives or the dutiful Republicans that were making such a fuss about that. When you think about it, it's not about paperwork, although it is. It's not about birth location. Well, it could be. No, it's about allegiance. And, all of the problems that we face today are because we really don't know, or do we, who is in the White House and the direction in which this man has taken us. We do know that, but wouldn't it be interesting, wouldn't it be legitimate to actually identify to whom this man is allied with? And, of course, we do know that to a larger extent, the New World Order, the political elite, the people behind the power, but yet to further disassemble that in a manner in which it needs to be from an investigative point of view, I think is critical, is absolutely critical. If you had a house and you had somebody inside your house, let's say working inside your house, working for you, because after all, doesn't the government work for the people, but working for you, and suddenly you don't know who that man is, or really who that man is, or you feel you've been lied to about who that person is in your house, doing the most important things, perhaps taking care of your family or your children. Wouldn't you want to know who that person is? Absolutely you would. And that's the same situation here. Anyway, I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. Thank you for your belief and your trust in us as we continue to stroll through this minefield together. It is a minefield, folks, to be sure.
Yes, it is. And happy it's Friday. We had a jam-packed week, and we have a good show scheduled for tonight. John Moore should be joining us shortly, and if he does not connect with us in the next couple of minutes, I will jump off air real quick and call him and remind him or tell him that this show is at 8. I'm not sure if he's on Central Time, I believe, and there was some confusion when we talked the first time, but he should be joining us any minute. So for the first 2 hours of the show, he will be with us, and John Moore has a great show, a radio show. He is on the forefront of so much information as it pertains to the state of the United States military, the economy, martial law, all these people that are in these places of power. Call him and give him information, and he discloses that information to his audience, and tells them, you need to have the discernment to. I'm just the messenger giving you the information, but a lot of breaking news has come out from John Moore's information, and he is on the front lines. Doing what he does is vitally important. As Russ Dizdar was on a guest last night, and Paul McGuire the night before. As you say, we need to play our positions. Well, these men are at the they're the number one in their position, and it's an honor to be able to have these people and gentlemen on the show. Now that
I don't know whether you saw this or not, ladies and gentlemen. The FBI has had urged charges in Maricopa County inquiry. There was a year-long abuse of power case against the Sheriff Joe Arpaio. This was eventually shut down, but it's worthy to note that federal investigators concluded that there was sufficient evidence. Now, this is Arizona Central reporting this, that federal investigators said that there was sufficient evidence to bring charges against public officials during their years-long abuse of power investigation targeting Maricopa County law enforcement agencies, including Sheriff Joe Arpaio. This, to me, is nothing more. Speaking of the eligibility issue, we've got such havoc within the Department of Justice going on. We've got such unbelievable havoc or orchestrated chaos with respect to DOJ. And the Department of Justice is out there as a machine to shut down, to shut up people who are bringing cases or bringing to light adverse information against Obama and his minions, as well as other people close to that whole category.
And this is par for the course for what they do. Any person who speaks in opposition to their agenda and the people who are pushing their agenda, whether it is peaceful, no matter what the opposition is and what form it takes, it is met with hatred and is attacked legally. They try to take him down legally. They try to take him down physically, as in some of the journalists like Michael Hastings and other people. They're not playing around.
No, they're not. And of course, we do know, folks, a couple of things. What about Bitcoin? What about the CEO of one of the exchanges for Bitcoin being found dead in her Singapore home this past week? Well, she was discovered on February 28th, but she'd worked for Apple in Silicon Valley before joining Bitcoin. Well, before joining the digital currency startup First Media, connected to Bitcoin, or First Meta connected to Bitcoin. That's Autumn Radke, 28 years old.
And also, aside from the deaths, the mysterious death, we have a report from Zero Hedge on J.P. Morgan preparing to unveil its own electronic currency, a Bitcoin-style currency.
Correct. Which that's been in the works for some time, but Bitcoin is unique in the sense that there was really no way to track it. And I'm not going to get into the nuances of Bitcoin, but nonetheless, you're looking at really the 10th public death of someone related to the financial industry here, and then that's Autumn Radke, who was discovered on February 28th. And it's interesting. They don't know how she died. They suspect it was a suicide, and they're also doing doing the toxicology tests and such. But it's really interesting if you look at how things are playing out, and that's what we're doing right now. We're looking at the larger picture. We've in addition to the domestic financial problems, you've got Russia, for example. this past Tuesday, saying that if the United States were to impose sanctions on Russia over Ukraine, which they had threatened to do, Moscow might be forced to drop the dollar as a reserve currency and refuse to pay off any loans to U.S. banks. Could that, folks, trigger an collapse? Of course it could. It could be one of many. Our destabilization program against Ukraine is the continuation of the program that we ran against Syria. You've got to understand that. And if people look at this as if they're two separate incidents, they're not. This is all part of a single larger program.
With that, we have our guest with us, Mr. John Moore. John, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Joe. Good to be with you.
Hi, John. Doug here, and I want to welcome you as well. Good to talk with you.
Good to be here.
This is your second time here, and we're glad to have you. You're an excellent radio show host on the front lines of such important information, and we need people like you. And we've had so many great guests on this show, and each one brings a great perspective and insight and to the listening audience, and what you bring to the table is.
Yeah, and John, for the people who don't know you, for our audience who don't know you, why don't you give our audience an overview of your show and a little bit about yourself? Because we've got since the last time you were on here, we've picked up so many new listeners.
Right, right.
So go ahead and
sure. Well, I guess maybe a little bit about myself first, if I can get my tongue untwisted. I've been a criminal investigator, private detective for most of my adult life, since 1973. This will be my 41st year. I'm also a graduate paralegal, been involved in serious legal matters my entire adult life. Preceded as a very young man by being an intelligence analyst in U.S. military intelligence, including a tour in Vietnam with psychological warfare and a tour in special forces where I was with a 6th group at Bragg, preparing to invade the Middle East and being put on alert. Good way to get your attention. So I became a radio talk show host in 1995, 19 years ago, as a part-time, one-day-a-week adventure while I was doing my investigative assignments. And I'm looking to do a segue here from being a homicide detective to being a full-time radio talk show host. I've had enough murders to last me a lifetime, and it's time to move on. So it's fun being a radio talk show host, meeting all the different guests that we have and reading all the books we have to read and reaching out to people with this information to inform, educate, and entertain, which is what a radio talk show host does. It's a lot of fun, and I'm glad to be with you guys tonight.
John, it's amazing because our paths are somewhat similar, except I don't have the military experience you do. I've been a detective for the last 30 years. Joe's been a detective for 8 years. And I got to tell you, man, it's,
John's a former homicide detective also. And
Okay.
His website is thelibertyman.com. Bookmark that site and stay up to date on all his audio shows are put there and information is uploaded there, and he broadcasts with the Republican Broadcasting. No, not Republican. Republic.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was gonna take the nerf bat to Joe tonight.
Heaven forbid.
Yeah. Republic Broadcasting, and John, what time does your show run?
0600 Central Time, Monday through Friday.
Okay.
Way too early, but that's the time slot I got, so that's what I do.
Well, you do it well. I've been getting a lot of emails about your subject matter, about your topics, and I think that we parallel in many things. Let me ask you this: what do you see, John, today? Here we are, March 7th, 2014. It seems like we've got really this stuff hitting the fan all around us.
We do.
What do you see as the most important thing that we should be focusing on?
Well, there's two matters. I'm not sure I can put one above the other. I give them equal relevance, equal importance. What's going on in Ukraine, in the Crimea, is incredibly important. Back during the Clinton administration, a treaty was signed guaranteeing the sovereignty of the Ukraine. In return, they gave up their nuclear weapons to Russia and also destroyed their conventional weapons, including 1 million rifles and over 1,000 tanks and Lord knows what else in terms of conventional weaponry, leaving them basically and essentially unarmed, and their sovereignty being guaranteed in this treaty by Russia, the United States, NATO, and so forth. We, the United States and NATO, apparently under this treaty, which I don't have a copy in front of me, are obligated to, under this treaty, defend the Ukraine if it's attacked or it's at risk. So it reminds me of the Korean situation. We were obligated under treaty obligations there to defend Korea if it was attacked, and of course it was, and that began the Korean War, which, by the way, is still not over. The North Koreans never did sign a surrender or a peace treaty. So it's very dangerous. This all began not long after massive natural gas deposits were discovered in the Ukraine 9 months ago, which changes the whole balance of power in that part of the world. It's been said with some accuracy that Russia is a one-product economy, and that product is petroleum products, oil and gasoline, or natural gas, I should say, oil products and natural gas. Losing that is something the Russians are not going to do. They will not tolerate that, and they will do whatever it takes to not lose their control over the Ukraine. So that's one topic. The other is the economy. Various prognosticators, Gerald Celente being one of the main ones, Gerald Celente, of course, has become pretty mainstream on network TV frequently. These economic prognosticators are screaming from the top of their lungs to the top of the buildings that we're in deep, deep trouble and that this cannot go on without some kind of very horrendous, devastating correction of some sort. What form it will take remains to be seen. Will we repudiate the debt? Not necessarily. Will it be a massive hyperinflation? Possibly. Will it be a massive deflation? Will there be both at the same time? Regardless, for us barefoot peasants, I refer to myself as a barefoot peasant. How it plays out is going to harm us. Many people our age, Doug, and I'm just a little bit older than you, I believe, lost their savings, their equity, in the 2008 crash. People my age in their mid to late 60s find themselves still having to work when I thought they'd be comfortably retired after what happened in 2008. That will be a picnic compared to this economic correction that is nigh upon us. When will it happen? Very likely. When? I can't say. I'm getting information. It could be the second quarter this year, which begins in about 3 weeks. It could be any time this year. Gerald Celente has a great track record. I'm no economist, don't pretend to be, but I follow people who have credentials and have a track record like Gerald Celente, and when he speaks up, I pay attention because of his track record of being so accurate in what he says will happen in the near future. So, gentlemen, that's the two things that are big on my plate at the moment. There is a celestial event that may happen this coming September. I hope to know more about it this coming week. And it would be an Eastern and Caribbean event if it happens. So that's also kind of in the background.
All right. And we're going to be certain to be tuned into your show to hear what you've got to say about that. You know, it's interesting because those two things you mentioned, the Ukraine, Russia, as well as the economy here, are the two things that really we're following as well. And it seems like, John, that they're connected too, because I really believe, John, that if we look at Ukraine, none of this is happening in a vacuum. This is this is really a continuation of our policy against to destabilize Syria, and we're actually opening another front against Putin to fight in his front yard, so to speak. This was purely an Western intelligence operation in the Ukraine. Don't you think so? Clearly
okay. It was, yes.
Yeah, and you know, it's funny because it's not being portrayed as such, by the mainstream media, of course, and the mainstream media has really largely become irrelevant in this. But okay, so that said, and looking at this as an extension of Syria, I have a feeling Putin is going to come back and play the debt or currency card against us in a big way. He's going to strike back asymmetrically, much like we did to Russia or the USSR back in the late 80s, early 90s. What do you think?
Well, asymmetric warfare is, of course, the catchphrase that we hear so frequently. But oil is in the background of this, no matter which way you look. There was a book originally published, I'm just looking it up on Amazon here, titled The Prize, originally published 20 years ago, but there's an updated version apparently as of only a little more than a year ago. The Prize, subtitle, The Epic Quest for Oil, Money, and Power by Daniel Yergin, Y-E-R-G-I-N. There was also a PBS miniseries by the same title done about 20 years ago. The evidence that they present, Doug and Joe, and is a legal term that you and I are both very familiar with, clear and convincing evidence that every major war for the last century, actually slightly more than a century, has had oil interests in the background making it happen. This will be no different. This will be no different at all. Oil interests and the bankers that are part of it will be there and raising their ugly heads to have one more war for the same reasons.
Right on, John. And clear and convincing, that's a term that's seared into my brain, actually, over the years. And it's interesting because, I don't know about you, but I find approaching this from an investigative point of view or investigator's point of view, approaching all of these issues, it provides a different perspective and it gives you some essential background for which to look at these. And if you look at what's going on as the entire planet as a crime scene, you've got your primary and secondary crime scenes, and it's a complex one to say the least.
Yeah, it's maddening to work with a young lawyer. I've been training young lawyers now for more than 20 years. They come in and they can barely find their way to the courthouse. But I was working with one young female lawyer who had just her ink on her law degree was not quite dry yet, and I had a major homicide I was assigned to, and she keeps coming up with these bizarre theories about what happened in this homicide, and I had to keep telling her, young lady, there's no evidence to support your theory. There simply is none. So I live, and you live, Doug and Joe, we live in a world of evidence, not speculation, but evidence. And we look at two things. We look at the source of the information or the evidence, and we look at the evidence itself. And the way I was trained in military intelligence tells me to rate both. I rate the source on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the lowest, and I rate the evidence or the intelligence itself on a scale of 1 to 10, with 1 being the lowest. And you can have a fairly high rating for one and not the other, and occasionally you get a high rating for both. Putin is a master when it comes to manipulating the press, manipulating how the West thinks about him and perceives him. He's frequently photographed with a Christian crucifix hanging around his neck. This is a cold-blooded killer. This is a man, I don't know if he smokes or not, but he could put a bullet in your brain and sit down on your still warm body and smoke a cigarette.
Former KGB officer and
Colonel. Yeah,
right. The sentiments of the people that I see that talk about Putin, they say, "Oh, he's a Christian leader. We need a Putin as our president." Putin is more for freedom and Christianity than Obama and Bush were. They're embracing him.
Right, and that's all orchestrated, and quite frankly, the public statements he makes, I find myself agreeing with his public statements. I know what's behind them in the background, but his public statements, I have to admit, they're brilliant, absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
And what he did with us in Syria, I mean, we were just 2 clicks away from having another war with Syria, and thank God for Vladimir Putin stopping that. Oh, man.
It's something when as investigators, and I've got to say this, it's something when you look at somebody like Putin and you agree with him, what he's saying, even the message that he's providing is legitimate, but he is a messenger, as you pointed out, very cold-blooded, and he could shoot you, double tap you twice and sit down and have a smoke on your still warm and bleeding body.
Right.
And that really is what a mess that is. That creates for the American public and the American psyche and the Western psyche. But what we're looking at here, in my view, and John, I'd like your comments on this, is with respect to Syria, for example. We had 4 tries, or we made 4 big attempts to destabilize or to take out Assad in Syria. Now we're still going through, and we're still attempting to do that through the ISIS group, and opening up a front in southeastern Syria, northwestern Iraq.
Right.
Okay, now and of course, in conjunction with that, we're also hitting the Ukraine and as well as Crimea, and this is all about keeping the petrodollar scheme going, just until, in my view, the people who are behind this New World Order scheme, plot, can get all of us into the Titanic and then sink it, or to take their spoils and all of their spoils and then cut the Ponzi scheme. So, I mean, this is what I see taking place. So, any thoughts on that? I mean, maybe
what specifically, Doug? Do you want to go into the Middle East a little bit?
Yeah, well, let's go into the Middle East, because it ties so tightly into both the economic as well as the military aspects of things. So go ahead.
Okay. Well,
Middle East.
we need a little background here. I can't. When you got a public audience like we've got here, we cannot make assumptions. For 6 centuries, the following countries were all one country: Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Iraq, Iran, Jordan, Syria, Turkey, Lebanon, all those little Yemen, Kuwait. They were all one country. It was called the Ottoman Empire. So, Doug and Joe, you could be born in Egypt, go to school in Turkey, marry a woman from Iraq, and live in Syria. And that was done for 6 centuries until the British came there, following World War I, and split up that one country into all the countries that we now regard as the Middle East. Now, most Americans don't know this, but the leadership does. So when you hear Dick Cheney, for example, talking about foreign fighters coming into Iraq, the people that live there in the Middle East, they think, what's he talking about, foreign fighters? These are my cousins. Centuries, those people moved back and forth, married back and forth, conducted business back and forth. Going from Egypt to Saudi Arabia to Turkey is like going from Nebraska to Illinois to Ohio. One country, one language, one religion for 6 centuries. And in 1917, 1918, 19, here's what happened. The British military went to all these different areas, and they found minorities. Let's say, look at Iraq, for example. They found a minority that was getting beat up because they weren't the most, they didn't have the most people, the most resources, the most money and guns, and they made them an offer. Would you like to be the big guy on the block? Would you like to have your own country? Would you like to be the warlord? And if you do, we will supply you with arms, ammunition, and everything you need. They always pick minorities, Doug and Joe, because they knew that they would toe the line, because if they didn't toe the line, they would once again be the minority and be taken over and run by the people who were beaten up on before the British gave them this opportunity. Now, everybody in the Middle East knows what I just said. They all know their own history. If you were to go to a Chamber of Commerce meeting, Doug and Joe, in Iraq, and ask 100 men there, who can tell me the name of their grandfather 12 generations ago, all 100 hands would go up. Try to do that at a Chamber of Commerce meeting in the United States. See how far that gets you. You know?
Good point. Yeah, good point. Excellent.
And those 12 generations would be people scattered all over those countries. They're all related. They're all cousins. They all know each other. They're united by a common language and a common religion and a common history. And Americans don't know that. So another good example. I just finished reading Chris Kyle's, the U.S. Navy SEAL with the most confirmed kills, sniper kills. Chris Kyle's autobiography. And he got caught up in a thing which most Americans do, calling the people we're fighting over there insurgents. Well, Chris, I'm sorry, of course, Chris has passed on. He was in a tragic accident where he was shot to death, or homicide, I'm not sure which. Get your dictionary out, everybody. Look up the two words, insurgent and guerrilla. Now, right. Guerrillas fight foreign invading armies, and traditionally, historically, they're almost always the good guys. Anytime you're fighting a foreign invading army, you're a guerrilla and you're the good guy. Insurgents fight their own government. So Chris Kyle and everybody else who fought in Iraq, you were not the government of Iraq. You, in fact, were a foreign invading army, and you, in fact, were not fighting insurgents. You were fighting guerrillas. And that language manipulation, Doug and Joe, continues to this day, and it will always continue. The men and women we have in Afghanistan right now, they think they're fighting insurgents. They're fighting guerrillas. The prime minister of Afghanistan and every place else in Afghanistan is called the mayor of Kabul. That's how far his authority reaches, the city limits of Kabul. This man spent most of his adult life living somewhere other than Afghanistan. He has as much authority to the people that live there as the Vichy government did in France in 1943.
Okay, and this is important history, important background, important and relevant for Americans to understand. I'm amazed at how many Americans or how many people in the West don't really get this. Go ahead and continue. This is fascinating because this ties things together. The Ottoman Empire, folks, you just heard an encapsulated version of the history of the Ottoman Empire.
Iran wants to recreate the Ottoman Empire. And in fact, extend it to the entire planet. They want to recreate the Ottoman Empire and extend it to the entire planet, with Sharia law being the law of the land. That's their goal, and they're very serious about it. This is not some philosophical thing they discuss around the fireside at night. It is a very serious matter that they fully intend to implement when the time is right and they get the opportunity. They're putting all the pieces in place, in their opinion, to do so. We have thousands of Islamic people in this country. I hear these, once again, going back to American officials, talking about radical Islam. Islam is radical. Don't fool yourself. I have not heard any of the leaders of the Islamic countries or Hussein Obama say anything against the orders of death for cartoonists or anybody who makes fun of Muhammad. If you make fun of Muhammad, there will be a death order issued. If you leave Islam to become something other than a Muslim, a death order will be issued. And the people who are supposed to be the peaceful Islamic people, they don't have any harsh words for the Muslim potentates who put out these death orders for making fun of Allah, drawing a cartoon of Allah, and all the other things that they will issue death orders are. And it's kind of ironic, Hussein Obama, I like to use his middle name. Do you know what the name Barack means, by the way?
Go ahead and tell us.
That was the name of Muhammad's horse that he rode to heaven, Barack.
Right.
So we have a president named after a horse. Well, we do. I mean, that's a historical fact, and it is a factual fact. Right. Allegedly, Hussein Obama is a Christian, and he carries a Bible and goes to a Christian church. He has never publicly ever denounced Islam that I'm aware of. If he was to denounce Islam and proclaim publicly that he is now a Christian, there would probably be 20 or more Islamic clerics who would issue death orders for Hussein Obama because of his conversion to Christianity from Islam.
Half of them in the White House, perhaps.
Possibly.
Yeah.
Possibly. It's a bizarre and strange world that we live in. The mass media can make things look white, look black, and black look white. Look at the presidential race between John Kerry and George Bush. John Kerry is the combat veteran of Vietnam. And George Bush very carefully and very well protected us from the Viet Cong in Texas. But they made it look just the opposite. They made it look like John Kerry was a draft dodger and that President Bush George Bush was the war hero. Black is white and white is black. I mean, if they can do that, they can do anything they want.
That's true. Very, very true. Extremely true. Yeah.
Anyway, gentlemen,
go ahead.
People need to not dwell, and I know being where you are, Doug and Joe, you get all these people anguishing in phone calls and emails about false flag attacks. Every hour you spend anguishing over what is or what is not a false flag attack, the Sandy Hook tragedy, for example, that's an hour that could have been spent maybe learning first aid or learning your ham radio skills or learning cross-country navigation, how to use a map and compass. Those hours are wasted hours. I'm here to tell everybody. Do not anguish over things that won't change anything. It serves no useful purpose. You're wasting your precious time that you could use for other things. So don't do that.
All right.
And I want to say this. One of the first times I listened to you, Mr. Moore, you got information about, I think it was Planet X, and you felt it was very important to relay the information because you didn't know either way if it was true or false, but you said something that really stuck with me, and you said, I'm just the messenger relaying what I was told, but you folks need to pray about this and use your discernment and listen to the Lord as to the legitimacy of what we just said. And today it's so lacking in the news, whether it's radio, TV, for people to give that kind of advice to their audience. And
well, gentlemen, you're right. A friend of mine, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but a friend of mine was the headmaster at a private Christian school in my hometown, St. Louis, and we were talking once about the education situation. He said, John, we spend a disproportionate amount of our time attempting, and emphasizing the word attempting to teach these youngsters critical thinking skills, because that's what they're lacking, critical thinking skills. And that's what's lacking in the general American public, and that's by design. It is absolutely by design. Estimates run typically 50% of the American adults are functionally illiterate. That means they cannot read to a third grade level. 25% of them can't read at all. It's very scary when you have people going into a polling place and casting ballots who are illiterate. In fact, gentlemen, I point this out frequently. At the top of your ballot, there's a picture of a donkey, a picture of an elephant, and a picture of an eagle for the Constitution Party. Those pictures aren't there for decoration. Those pictures are there for the illiterate voters so they know which candidates are which. Otherwise, they wouldn't. Now, that's how dismal it is. We need to have pictures of elephants and pictures of donkeys so people know the difference between the Republican candidates and the Democratic candidates. That's how bad it is.
It's extraordinarily bad. In addition to the illiteracy by the Americans themselves, we've got this influx of illegal aliens here in this country, John, who are not assimilating and, in fact,
They have no intention to assimilate.
Yeah, the Balkanization of America, as I like to call it, is really, I mean, this is a plan to Balkanize America. Don't you agree?
Well, it's a successful plan. This La Raza effort down in Mexico is, in my opinion, funded by the bankers behind the scenes. And I believe there's been a deal cut between Mexico and the international cartel that Mexico will reacquire what we purchased. And we had a war with Mexico back in the 1830s, and they lost the war on one hand, but on the other, we did purchase the conquered territory. We didn't just take it and hold on to it, which was Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. La Raza fully intends to get that back. That's their goal. I believe Mexico has given consent to the People's Liberation Army to have Mexico be a staging area for when they conduct their invasion, in return for getting some or most of what they sold off in the 1830s, get it back and return to Mexico.
Pretty significant, pretty ambitious agenda, but nonetheless being assisted and facilitated by members of our own leadership, I suppose, would be one way of saying it. Do you see kind of an offshoot of this, picking your brain a little bit, do you see amnesty being an issue that will be tackled here in the short term, amnesty for the illegals here?
It's a hot button issue, and it's an off year. No, wait, we have congressional elections this year, don't we?
Well, yeah. So do you see them pushing that back, or pushing that aside, or perhaps? If
it doesn't happen soon, it's not going to, because as these congressional elections heat up towards the end of spring, I doubt that we're going to see much action, because it's a very emotional and very hot button issue. The United States has become the laughing stock of the world's militaries because of our integration of women into the Corps, and because of our failure to enforce our own borders. I'm not aware of any country where people can illegally enter and not be arrested if they're found. If there is one, please tell me. But every country, even fairly small countries with low budgets, will enforce their borders and enforce their immigration laws. That's one sign that you, in fact, are a country, is that you have defined borders and that those borders are protected. If you don't have defined borders and the borders are not protected, then you've lost part of what it means to even be a country.
Precisely. And of course, our sovereignty here is at stake, not only through this invasion of illegal aliens, but obviously it's being attacked, our sovereignty is being attacked, and will be, I believe, as a country, we're going to be pretty much wiped out as well with the takedown of the U.S. petrodollar, the U.S. dollar. And
absolutely. Going back to language manipulation, if you listen to National Public Radio, you will not hear the term illegal alien. You will hear undocumented workers.
Oh, yeah.
Doesn't that sound so soft and gentle? Undocumented workers. They're illegal aliens. They're criminals. I'm sorry, but that's what they are. They're criminals, pure and simple, subject to arrest and deportation. The local cops I know in my area, they don't know what to do, because if they arrest an illegal, the federales, the federal agents, won't even come and pick them up.
You know, it's interesting. I was reminded, and by the way, John, I've got probably, I don't know, somewhere around 4 dozen emails after announcing you were going to be on the show tonight. Listeners have sent emails to me wanting you to answer some questions, so we'll get to those. But
sure.
You mentioned about the federal government. There was one of our listeners had mentioned years ago, 50 years ago now, on the popular, at that time, a very popular television show, The Dick Van Dyke Show.
Oh, yes.
Where the family inadvertently hired an illegal alien, or as we call them today, undocumented workers. And it was funny because the INS had sent an agent out to pick this woman up at Dick Van Dyke's house,
right?
On the TV show, and then escort her out of the country.
Right.
Yeah, try to find that today, right? I mean, it's not. They don't even respond. The federal government doesn't even respond to any type of.
No, they don't. They don't. It's pretty. And I know there's a lot of good men and women. They call it ICE now, don't they? Working for ICE and
correct.
Who want to do a good job, want to carry out their mission statement, but they just find themselves frustrated at every which way they turn by higher headquarters. It must be a maddening situation to have that kind of job and want to do a good job and not get the backup you need from your higher headquarters.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, knowing that the sovereignty of the United States is at stake here, and you had mentioned, I don't want to get too far ahead and kind of use a shotgun approach here, but let's turn our sights back to the Middle East, because you had mentioned about the recreation of the Ottoman Empire, and we see this, and we had talked about this on our show. We talk about this, the recreation of the Ottoman Empire, a lot. But with that, in addition to that, the United States, of course, were the engine behind the Arab Spring. People believe, and John, I have not caught a lot of your shows, but I've caught enough of them. Do people understand that the U.S., the Brits, the French were behind the Arab Spring? I mean, do they get that, do you think? Or
no, I don't think most people do. Well, a good example might be what happened in 1989, 1990 with East Germany, Hungary, Czechoslovakia, Poland, and so forth. What we're supposed to believe that happened in that 2-year period of time is that countries that had standing armies, secret police, you could not travel 20 miles the next town without a permit, you could not own a camera, a fax machine, or a radio without permission from the government, that young people in their teens and 20s came to the nation's capitals, jumped up and down saying, "We shall overcome," and the governments, including the secret police and the military, just collapsed without a shot being fired. That's what we're supposed to believe happened.
Hey, I'm all in on that. Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
That flies in the face of logic. Countries that are functioning countries that have standing armies that are fully equipped, secret police and uniformed police that are fully equipped, that have guns and radios and handcuffs, don't collapse because teenagers and people in their 20s want blue jeans and rock and roll. I mean, that doesn't happen, without a shot being fired. That's silliness. The same thing about the Arab Spring. You've got Egypt, and you've got these other countries where allegedly people came to the capitals and held signs and chanted and caused these governments to collapse. Come on, give me a break,
Exactly.
Though we're talking countries that are fairly brutal in the way they handle protests, compared to the more or less civilized Eastern Europe at that point in time. Although their secret police weren't known for being nice guys, they were civilized at least. They wouldn't cut your hand off if you stole a loaf of bread, like they will in Saudi Arabia. So yes, the Arab Spring was funded by the Western intelligence agencies to accomplish certain goals, and they did accomplish their goals. In fact, what happened in Egypt really did need to happen. We did not need the Muslim Brotherhood in power, and I'm glad that they're gone, and I'm glad that Muslim Brotherhood has been made illegal. They were started, by the way, by the Nazis 70 years ago.
That's right. Exactly, and people need to understand the close relationship between, the outgrowth of the National Socialist Party with the Muslim Brotherhood. People need to understand that, and
right.
and the role that the Muslim Brotherhood played in throughout the Second World War. But I guess maybe that's a larger point. You mentioned about how the pictures on the ballots are there for a reason. Well, not only have we been dumbed down linguistically, but we are also being our children and our this past couple of generations. We don't know history.
Let's go back to the summer of 1969. How many millions of people, or maybe at this point it's probably billions, have seen the flag, the American flag, on the moon blowing in the wind that doesn't exist on the moon?
Oh.
There's no wind on the moon, but the flag was clearly blowing in the wind.
Right.
Well, billions of people watch that, and they think that flag really was there blowing in the wind on the moon, where there is no wind.
Oh, but John, people will say, my goodness, you're not one of those who don't believe we landed on the moon.
I believe there's no wind on the moon.
That's
I learned that in junior high school science. There's no wind on the moon because there's no air.
So now people will say, so what was all that about then? What was all that? What was that big? So what did happen then, John?
It was a cover story to spend unbelievable amounts of money on other technology, is what it was, and continues to be.
Interesting. Yeah, I've heard a lot of interesting things the past couple of weeks about the technology we do have right now that will be used or is being used and will be used shortly. Any insight into that? Since we're on that topic now, in terms of technology.
I associate with people. I have friends who are involved in some of the highest levels of technology. I can tell you that our government and the private sector are both looking at methods of propulsion similar to what Professor McCanney has been advocating. Burning chemicals to get off this planet is, well, going back to junior high school, that's junior high school science, really. It's just on a much larger scale.
Right.
That's no way to travel from one planet to another. Anti-gravity propulsion devices, and I know for a fact this is being heavily looked into. I don't know how far they've gotten with it, is a way to travel from one heavenly body to another. What's being done, and one of the fascinating things I like to look into, gentlemen, is archaeology. And when it comes to technology, there's some evidence that in the basement of the big museum there in Baghdad in Iraq, there was ancient technology that people in the United States really, really wanted to get their hands on and control. There have been hundreds of what's called Baghdad batteries recovered now, dug up by archaeologists around Iraq. These were literally batteries that could make electricity that were more than 3,000 years old. So the technology we have now, computer technology the government has access to, is several generations, assuming we still double our ability every 18 months. There are 4 or 5 or 8 generations past anything we can imagine with what they have, which is hard to conceive. My friend Tim Spencer, who is my IT guy and was with me on my Thursday show, he's selling a flash drive on his website, an 8-gigabyte flash drive that has more than 400,000 pages of information on it, the size of your thumb. You know, it's a stack of paper 130 feet tall. And that's just technology you can buy at any grocery store or Walmart, you know, an 8-gigabyte, and that doesn't even use up all the memory. There's still 2 gigabytes left.
It's amazing when you think about that and think about how far what we know we have today versus what we don't know as well. But
let's talk something that will interest all your listeners. People get out of their mind anguish about the various weapons that might be used against us. So let's take one, for example, FLIR, forward-looking infrared radar. A FLIR unit on the front of a helicopter, you're probably looking at $80,000 to $100,000, maybe more. The Afghan guerrillas, using proper terminology, have been countering the $100,000 FLIR, forward-looking infrared radar, with, drum roll please, space blankets. The same old space blankets you can buy at your local Cabela's or Bass Pro or over the internet. Green space blankets. They hide the heat signature of a human being hiding underneath it, and that $10 space blanket defeats the $100,000 FLIR technology. And what I've come to find out, gentlemen, for every sophisticated gee whiz Star Wars technology, there's always a cheap countermeasure. We found this out in Vietnam. We had devices we could drop from aircraft that when they hit the ground, they would stick in the ground and look like a green living plant. There was two variations. One could detect the smell of human urine. The other could distinguish human foot tracks, footfalls from any other animal on the ground. So the Viet Cong were very clever. They hung buckets of human urine in the jungle, and we would send a crew of college-educated pilots flying a multi-million-dollar airplane from Thailand, B-52s, to bomb buckets full of urine in the jungle. Same thing with the devices that could tell human footfalls. The Viet Cong would just walk among pack animals, elephants, or whatever they could get, donkeys, to disguise their footfalls, and then we would not bomb them because there's a herd of elephants. We don't want to bomb them. Cheap countermeasures to all this high-tech stuff. So don't get worried. Don't anguish over. And it may take a while to figure out what the countermeasure would be. But personally, I got a case of green space blankets.
Interesting. And a lot of people, and we do see that, John, a lot of our listeners will write to us or will contact us and say, look, with all of the advanced weaponry there is out there and advanced technology there is out there, how can we possibly defeat the government or the criminal elements of the government when they come for us?
Here's reality, gentlemen. Within an hour of the Russian military being activated in the United States, or the Chinese, within an hour, there'll be Chinese sergeants and Russian sergeants trading weapons and ammunition for whiskey or whatever it is else they want. That's every war for the last 5,000 years. Seriously. I mean, a senior sergeant can get his hands, if he knows what he's doing, and a lot of them do, in any military, they can steal anything from their own military they want and then trade it in turn for what he wants to get. It might be whiskey, it might be steaks, it could be anything you can think of. Maybe a Mustang sports car. And they'll trade whatever they have to steal from the Russian military, from the Chinese military, in order to get their hands on what they want. The black market will begin within an hour of any military adventure in this country.
John, that was a question from one of our listeners in advance here. I got this morning about your thoughts on the foreign military in our country, the threat that they pose, and we'll let you consider the answer to that. And I think you've given us a little tease to that answer here just now. But with that, we're up against the top of the hour. Folks, you're listening to John Moore. John Moore first fought terrorism back in 1967. He is still fighting it today, of course. His website, thelibertyman.com. He's got a show, John Moore Show. I would recommend everyone listen to this because John Moore is a man with vast amounts of knowledge about personal security, personal safety, helping others like you being safe against not only terrorism but the threats we face on a daily basis. Again, his website is thelibertyman.com. His show is Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 Central in the morning, 6 to 7 a.m. Central, or if you want the real time, it's 7 to 8 Eastern. That's the real time here.
Okay, I live in flyover country.
Okay. And John is really, and I don't say this lightly, an American hero, and I believe that, John, because of your walking through the streets and alleys of Vietnam back in the day. And I got to tell you, a lot of people, I just have the utmost respect for your military service, in perhaps under the worst conditions you can imagine. So
to have them. And John, I'm going to open with a question. We have in the last few years, and even currently, seen Russian special ops troops, Chinese troops, foreign troops training with American troops in America.
Right.
These are the same countries now that and have been really pitted against us as far as, you know, the countries they support, especially, you know, Syria, Iran, North Korea, etc. What kind of problems could that bring to this country if this Russia-Ukraine situation, if we get too involved? I mean, do we have lots of foreign troops here that are just stationed here for training purposes, or are just stationed here like we're stationed around the world?
Well, we have had foreign troops cycling through training for decades. That's really nothing new or unusual. I'm more concerned about the covert side of the house. For example, driving a semi-tractor trailer is considered a good-paying blue-collar job for Americans. You don't need to have anything past a high school education and so forth to make a good living for yourself and your family. Why in the world do we have all these Russian truck drivers driving American semi-tractor trailers? I don't know if it's thousands or if it's just hundreds, but it's quite a few. In fact, I bumped into one in my neighborhood. He missed a turn on a two-lane blacktop and needed some assistance to get turned around because of the narrow situation with the roads. There's just 2-hour drive south of me. There's a facility owned and run by Russians. They publicly they say they're a alcohol and drug rehab facility for Russian men from St. Petersburg, Russia. Why in the world are they in Texas County, Missouri, doing what they do? It seems like it'd be a lot more efficient and practical and cost-effective to be doing that somewhere in Russia or Europe as opposed to halfway around the planet in Texas County, Missouri. It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, it's difficult to explain away, I think, John, and I think I have that same concern, and you know, it's something too. As we had begun to mention this, we've been getting emails of saying the various things that you're saying here with respect to long distance truck drivers, men who are from Russia, not so much the Asian countries, but specifically from Russia, who are engaged in working on our infrastructure, who are involved in transportation, who are involved in our ports. I mean, so could this be somewhat of an deliberate infiltration?
Well, I believe so. I mean, when you're sitting in the seat of one of those trucks, you're 10 feet above the ground. You've got a really good view. What better way to learn how this country's put together than to ride back and forth up north and south, east and west, 10 feet above the ground in the front seat of a semi-tractor trailer? And you're right; they're heavily involved in parts of critical infrastructure that, in turn, during any kind of wartime environment, would be absolutely necessary and critical to our defense. And they're up to their eyeballs in these areas of our country.
Do you see them as let's see here.
How about clear and present danger?
Yeah, thank you. There we go. Now we're talking the same language.
Yes, sir.
But looking at this on a short-term basis, and who knows anymore with respect to time periods, you know, pick a crisis, and I suspect that we could make a case for any individual crisis to overtake us at any given time. But the clear and present danger, I guess the emphasis on present, or could it be perhaps maybe a little bit more in the future, down the road a little bit?
Well, you would pre-position men like this a few years in advance, not 10 or 20 years in advance. They'll be retired and moved on with their lives. So I think whatever this event is, it's fairly near to us in time, without naming any dates, which is a foolish thing to do unless you got some really good documentation to back it up. If you read The Art of War by Sun Tzu, which is a book older than the Bible, it's mandatory reading for all Russian officers. I don't know how much is read at West Point and Annapolis and the Air Force Academy, but I know it's mandatory reading for all Russian military officers. The tactics they're using are right out of Sun Tzu. They're pre-positioning men, pre-positioning their equipment and supplies. These Chinese free trade areas, in my opinion, are little more than pre-positioning of what they'll need for war. It's brilliant. If I was in charge of the Russian and Chinese militaries, I'd be doing exactly what they're doing and smiling every day in my accomplishments. Being able to pre-position your men, equipment, and supplies in the country you want to invade is almost never done. But when it is, it's a beautiful way to take over a country and accomplish your goal.
Yeah, exactly. And The Art of War, folks, if you haven't read that, it's a very thin book, Sun Tzu, The Art of War, relatively thin, I should say, but definitely important reading to understand asymmetrical warfare. Well, I'll tell you what, John, we've got a lot of your fans writing in. Margot from Oklahoma writes, wonderful that you've got John Moore on tonight. Love him, love his show. Love his show so much that she even sent you a T-shirt. So if you're
yes, nice
okay.
T-shirt.
Yeah. Okay, and another actually, this is from Bill from North Carolina. Writes, let me distill this question here. Okay. This does relate to the foreign presence here in this country. China buying real estate all over America. What are your thoughts on this? Is this part of this? Part of the?
It's part of the what's eventually what they will consider colonization. What the Chinese want and what the Russians want, other than being able to take over the world, of course. They want the grain growing area. There's no place on the planet Earth equal to the grain growing area we have in the Midwest. There simply isn't. The factories are dismantled and gone. The people are semi-literate and not productive. There's not much else that they really want here. But the grain growing area will be the prize for them. There'll be other things, of course, that they'll want, but the grain growing area is the main goal, to be able to feed their people. The Chinese are also colonizing Central Africa, by the way, for some of the same reasons. There's a lot of fertile soil there, decent climate, plenty of water and rain, a cheap, productive workforce, and the Chinese have completed a highway from China all the way to Africa. And they announced about 15 months ago that they're going to build a causeway across the Saudi peninsula there to the Horn of Africa, Somalia, which will save probably 2 days' drive to get to Central Africa. My friend Command Sergeant Major Dan Page spent a year of his life in Central Africa with cameras and various recording devices documenting what China, the People's Liberation Army, is doing in Central Africa. They're building roads. They're building power plants, water treatment plants, sewage treatment plants, hospitals, airports, everything you would need to colonize an area. They're doing it. And that highway comes out of China through the Hindu Kush, which is a mountain pass area, into Afghanistan, across Afghanistan, into Iran, across Iraq, and into Saudi Arabia. And it's for use, military vehicles use only. No other vehicles are allowed but the military on this highway. The highway began more than 50 years ago, in the late 50s, as some kind of United Nations project. But now it's complete, and of course they'll start building the causeway here fairly soon. So colonization is what we're looking at, gentlemen. Colonization.
And
across the planet.
Absolutely.
And China has, bought up so much different landmarks, properties here in the United States. I think it was Rockefeller sold the Rockefeller Center to China.
Did they buy that? I don't know.
I think 60%, last time I heard, of New York City was owned by China. And that could be wrong, but it's not too far off if I remember correctly.
Well, here's something for all the Bible scholars out there. I know when I read as a youngster or a teenager about the million horse cavalry coming out of the east and going to the Middle East. I thought, well, this is some quaint Bible story. What's that got to do with modern times? Well, it turns out, ladies and gentlemen, the Chinese, the People's Liberation Army, is, as we speak, building a 1 million horse cavalry in Mongolia right now.
Are you talking literal horses?
Literally horses, yes. Hay in one end, Democrats out the other.
Oh, gosh, okay.
Yeah, horses.
Horses. Folks, did you catch that? Good one, John. Good one.
Thank you. But no, there's a fairly well, and it's been made into a statue you can buy, the 4 Green Berets charging across the plains of Afghanistan on horses about 7 or 8 years ago. There's still a place for horses in modern warfare, especially when you get into these isolated places that don't have, very good logistics in terms of being able to keep trucks and so forth running. If you got access to grass and water, the horses will just keep going. So yes, they in fact are building a 1 million horse Mongolian horse army. They'll be ridden by these short, tough Mongolian cavalrymen into this next war, just like the Bible says they would.
Oh, yeah. Biblical accuracy.
And some of the research I've been doing, reading about the Manly P. Hall, Albert Pike, Thomas Hobbes, and talking about the creation of America and what it should be created for, it is just along the lines of what we hear, for the New World Order out of chaos. They wanted to build up this country to make it a superpower, to bring about these world wars, to have a post-war world peace through the United Nations and the one world religion they're establishing. And, I mean, it has never been clearer before our eyes than it is today.
Absolutely. I could not agree more.
With the Israeli-Palestinian peace deal, the Americans threatening Israel, or at least Obama, how much influence would you say Obama has in the agenda being pushed? I mean, I understand he's a puppet. Do you think he is just a teleprompter reader, just like a newscaster, or do you think he actually has a say in kind of what goes?
I believe that he's an empty suit doing what he's told. He was recruited as a teenager by the KGB when he was in Indonesia. And the relationship between the atheist communists and the Muslims is an interesting one. But he is now and always will be a Muslim. He hates America. His father hated America, and he hates America. And I think he's doing what he's told. Valerie Jarrett is probably down in a sub-basement of the White House, actually making day-to-day decisions. This guy likes to play golf. If he was a CEO of a Fortune 500 company and played golf as much as he does, the board of directors would fire him.
Well, unless, of course, I was J.P. Morgan Chase or Goldman Sachs, but then that's just my view. Yes, you're exactly right. And I've got probably half a dozen questions from listeners about Obama. Your take on Obama. Do you believe, and this is from J.V. from South Carolina, writes, does John Moore believe, do you believe, sir, that Obama, or could Obama be the Manchurian candidate, meaning somehow, affected by the CIA and placed into power through a series of, through decades of training? Right.
Well, he does fit the profile of a Manchurian candidate, but not put in place by the CIA, more likely put in place by the KGB. Please recall, gentlemen, the open mic incident where he was talking to the then president of Russia and before the election, and made a statement to the effect, let Vladimir know that once I get reelected, I'll have more flexibility, words to that effect. That sounded like an underling reporting to his boss to me.
Exactly, and I've heard a lot of different explanations without the necessary context about that. So, yeah, I think you're right in that respect, that did sound like some sort of backroom deal being made, perhaps. So if that's the case, John, how would you explain then the alleged or ostensible chaos or the headbutting with respect to Ukraine, Crimea, and such that's taking place now?
It's all orchestrated.
Okay.
It's all orchestrated. I can't tell you what's going to happen. I can tell you that no matter who wins, the bankers are going to win. The more we find out about some of these wars that have taken place the last century, the more we find out that there are no countries when it comes to people like International ITT, Ford Motor Company. Ford Motor Company made trucks for the American Army and made trucks for the Third Reich.
Right.
They don't care about countries. They don't care about nationalities. They care about profit. That's all they care about, and that has not changed. We have quite a few multinationals doing business in Russia. ITT is a good example, an excellent book. It's got some age on it, 30 years old. The Sovereign State of ITT documents how the more than 1,000 subsidiaries of ITT do what they do all over the world. Any country they go into, they pretend to be a homegrown country, and they put on their board of directors high-profile members of that country from government, business, and the military on their board of directors of whatever country they go into, which gives them firsthand intelligence about what's going on in government and in the business and in the military, because they've got the top people on the board of directors. They don't care about countries. They care less about countries.
Yeah, it's all about lining their pockets. It's all about profits. I think we get that pretty well. My goodness, John, you've got a lot of people who want to pick your brain about different issues, and it seems like I'm trying to, as these questions are coming in, I'm trying to categorize them. But I've got one here from Larry from California wanting to know. This is on a different subject altogether, John. So bear with me as we change gears here. Larry wants to know this: what's the status? Now, you had previous intel about the rising ocean levels, and you had referenced or published a map a number of years ago of what areas of the U.S. would perhaps be underwater. Now, is that still valid? Or
oh, absolutely, it has not changed.
Okay. And Larry wants to know, could you explain why it is the ocean levels would rise so much?
Right. Well, it took me almost 3 years to figure it out, because most of my sources were the Navy veterans in the folding chairs. They weren't the scientists. They were told what would happen. They weren't told how or why. There's sea level is measured at Cornwall, England, and that's been that way for more than 200 years. They took a really big rock at the edge of the ocean in Cornwall, England, made a horizontal line, and they said, this is sea level. That's fairly far north. You're almost as far north as Moscow. It's pretty far north. When you get to the equator, sea level is not quite 500 feet above that horizontal line in Cornwall, England. And that massive bulge of water at the equator extends north and south of the equator for many hundreds of miles, amounting to what consists of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of cubic miles of water above what we call sea level at Cornwall, England, held in place by two things: gravity and the rotation of the Earth. Anything that disrupts the rotation of the Earth more than 1 or 2 degrees is going to disrupt that water. This has happened many times in the past. The scientists have determined this by measuring the magnetic particles in lava from volcanoes. When it cools down, those particles line up with wherever the North Pole happens to be. Magnetic North happens to be at that point in time. And the magnetic North Pole has been in many different places from where it is now, which means the equator has been in many places from where it is now. So a pole shift is what we're talking about here. Usually these pole shifts are in the range of 12, 15, 17 degrees, not necessarily 90 or 180. That would be probably wipe out every living thing on the planet. But a 17-degree pole shift would flood all coastal areas worldwide. And that's what we're looking at. That's what the Navy's preparing for. That's why the federal government of the United States has moved the CIA from Langley, Virginia to Denver. That's why the NSA has moved from Fort Meade, Maryland to Utah and the Denver both. You don't willy-nilly move tens of thousands of government workers for no reason. It has to be a really good reason to spend that kind of money and disrupt people's lives that much. A reason that you have no choice. And if it was 20 years in the future, why would you do it now? Those people all be retired and moved on with their lives. You do it when you have to, maybe a few years before. I can't name a date. But this is just as valid as it was when I put that map out, the map we recreated by working with the Navy veterans who were shown these maps beginning in 1979, by the way. The first briefing we tracked it back to with admirals back in 1979. It hasn't changed. It's still a scenario that will happen at some point in the future. I can't say when. I can say that the government is so concerned about it that they've spent hundreds of millions of our dollars preparing for it.
Wow. And that's rather sobering to think about. So what you're saying is not only the United States, but worldwide, the coastal regions, we're going to be losing a lot of land mass.
Well, there's a lot of speculation, Doug and Joe, about the brand new empty cities that China has built.
Yeah.
I don't need to speculate. They built them because they're going to need them.
So okay, all right.
They're gonna have to move an awful lot of people away from the coast. They built those cities because they're going to need them. There's no secret to me.
Wow. Okay. Well, no, that would explain or would provide an explanation.
Usually, the simple answer is the correct one.
Interesting. All right.
They built them because they're going to need them.
All right. Wow. Okay. And this goes right along. A nice segue from this. This is actually by Daniel P. Thank you, Daniel P. From your area, your neck of the woods, flyover country, wanting to know what Earth events, near-Earth events, or celestial events, or whatever, and he gives a list here of potential things to take place, are you keeping your eyes open for the near term, near the asteroids, anything?
Well, I'm interviewing a man Monday who claims to have information on what might be an asteroid striking the east side of the Caribbean this coming September. I don't have a lot of details now. I hope to have more live on my show Monday. You really can't keep track of things like coronal mass ejections because they happen with almost no notice. We're apparently due for a Carrington-level event similar to what happened in 1859 when the telegraph offices and fields caught on fire from the electromagnetic energy that hit the Earth in 1859. A similar event now, a Carrington-level event now, would knock out half the planet, and it's a possibility from the scientists I've talked to that the coronal mass ejection could go all the way around the planet, not just hit half the planet. It would be an extinction-level event in terms of humans living on this planet, to say the least, if it was to happen. But there's no way to keep track of it. You can attempt to prepare for it, but there's nothing to keep track of because it's an event that happens with almost no warning.
Okay.
Yeah, and John, I want to say this because we had a guest on, and I can't remember who it was, but it had to be at least a month ago. They said something very similar to what you said. They said a possible economic event in April, and exactly what you said for the fall. They warned of two things.
Well, when you start getting information from sources that don't know each other saying the same thing, that's a basic investigative tool, isn't it, Doug and Joe?
Oh, you got that right. It's interesting, too, just to follow up on your previous comment, Dennis writes, Dennis, thank you for your email. He writes, as soon as Mr. Moore mentioned the roads from China to Africa, he thought of the million-man Chinese army of Revelation, but this is the first he heard about the army of Mongolians. And
Mongolians are Chinese.
Yeah, exactly. And he writes that we see prophecy, biblical prophecy happening every day, and also writes that rarely does he hear the art of war being mentioned, and of course he's read it and has a copy. But there's an issue that is also brought up here, which kind of segues into this as well.
I got a free download on my website for The Art of War, by the way.
Oh, okay. And that's off of
thelibertyman.com.
Right. Okay, all right, good. Thank you for that. You had mentioned this, okay, and again, getting so many questions, folks. You'll have to just be patient if I don't get to your question, or if we don't get to your question. John Moore, of course, his show Monday through Friday, 6 to 7 a.m. Central Time. So tune in there if we don't get to your questions. And John's got an amazing show. You had mentioned that, and we often talk about the influx of military foreign troops in this country. But one of the people here, I'm not sure who wrote this. You'll have to forgive me. Anyway, what about the Islamic training compounds in this country? I've investigated, for example, Jamaat al-Fukra and other such terrorist organizations. I call them terrorist organizations because that's what they are.
Right.
Do you see them as a threat here, as part and parcel to the I mean, why are they existing unmolested here in this country, such as the Jamaat al-Fukra terrorist organization?
Because the FBI will do what they're told to. I came across a communist, there's a group called the IWW, International Workers of the World, also called the Wobblies, and I came across a community organizer who was trained by them. So I called up a gentleman I knew in the FBI, an FBI agent, and I said, I got a tip for you here. A admitted communist who's working as a community organizer in my community. And he says, the FBI agent says, "Oh, John, we no longer keep track of the communists." End of story.
Nice.
Yes. There's been a lot of concern that the FBI is curtailed in doing effective investigations of Islamic groups in this country. The Islamic groups that we have been very effective in lobbying Congress to curtail proper and thorough investigation of their activities. I was at a meeting with Special Agent Robert Wright, FBI Special Agent Robert Wright, and the head of Judicial Watch and one of the attorneys who helped prosecute Bill Clinton up in Chicago in the law office. And Special Agent Wright was having great difficulty getting the FBI to apply for warrants with the Justice Department to get the Islamic people that he was investigating arrested, which was the purpose of and that was with, I'm trying to think of the man's name. I'll probably think of it in 5 minutes after the show's over. This is a problem, and it came up after 9/11/01. Also, FBI agents doing good work, investigating very strange activities on the part of David Shippers. That was the name of the attorney, the man who helped prosecute Bill Clinton in the impeachment. It was at his office, Dave
Shippers. I met Dave Shippers and was in his office back in several years ago.
Crusty.
Interesting man.
Crusty guy, real crusty.
Yeah, very, very much. I got to tell you, John, I looked. I was in his office, sitting there, and he had to use the restroom, so I kind of snuck over and looked at his phone. And of course, several years ago now. But I looked at the speed dial, the pad, and it blew me over. The numbers that were on his speed dial, I thought, my gosh, who is this guy?
Well, that's why that meeting was taking place with the head of Judicial Watch and David Shippers, because the head of Judicial Watch at the time was on a first-name basis with the Attorney General of the United States, John Ashcroft. And the whole purpose of the meeting was to attempt to get Ashcroft to do something. And Special Agent Wright had a binder, which I would call a trial folder, trial notebook, very beautifully done. And this is about the first week of August 2001, by the way. Very critical period of time. I'm standing there behind Wright because I know I'll never see this trial notebook again. And I'm thinking to myself, this can't be the only agent that's having this problem, and we were in deep trouble, which, of course, we found out 5 weeks later. good FBI agents, almost all the men and women who join the FBI do it for good reasons, for patriotic reasons. They want to do the right thing for the right reasons, but their upper commands won't let them. We find out after the fact, after 9/11/01, that agents were reporting Muslim men engaged in pilot training. It didn't make any sense. Doing these activities that were very suspicious, and the reports were being ignored.
When did this start? When did this start in earnest, where we began protecting the very people who are part and parcel to our ultimate demise?
Well, I know that when Hoover was alive, it wasn't happening. Hoover had his faults and his peccadillos, so to speak, but if you were a communist, you better lay low when Director Hoover was alive. I don't know after that. I mean, I haven't followed it that carefully. All we know is where we are right now, with a FBI that's been basically emasculated.
Okay, Annie O from Oklahoma City wants to know your insight into the Oklahoma City bombing.
Well, I'm no explosive expert, but we did have General Parton, a genuine, bona fide explosive expert, conduct an investigation and get a videotape of his cursory investigation to every member of Congress before the evidence was destroyed, which is critical. Attempting to preserve the evidence, which is what you do at any crime scene, gentlemen. You preserve the evidence and preserve the crime scene so that proper investigation can be done. Despite General Parton's cursory investigation showing that what happened could not happen, the evidence, the crime scene was destroyed and taken to a landfill. Conventional explosives of that nature. Now, I gave testimony before the Missouri legislature on this. Most people don't know that farmers have been mixing up diesel fuel and fertilizer for decades to move rock and dirt. It's not a secret out here in flyover country. You can move rock and dirt by mixing up diesel fuel and fertilizer. It's not a very powerful explosive. It's a slow-moving explosive, but if it's mixed right and compacted right, you can move some dirt and rock. Big deal. That much, a truck full of fertilizer and diesel fuel cannot do, parked in the street away from the building, cannot do what was claimed to be done. It simply couldn't. It defies the laws of physics. And General Parton made a very strong case with his video that he got to every member of Congress attempting to preserve the crime scene so that proper investigation could be done. And, of course, they ignored his plea, and they allowed the crime scene to be destroyed.
Much like 9/11, of course. I mean, what do we see at 9/11 but the evidence being destroyed? It seems to be standard operating procedure, whether it's TWA Flight 800.
I mean, we learned from the main investigator, one of the main investigators or lawyers, that it was on Fox News maybe 6 months ago that they were revisiting the Oklahoma City bombing, and they went to the FBI to find the tapes of McVeigh in the Ryder truck, and the FBI said they didn't have them anymore.
Right. Well, there was multiple surveillance tapes around that plaza in downtown Oklahoma City that the public has never seen. And
yeah,
you know, what can you say? I mean, people have limited knowledge about these matters which involve science. The people that do have the knowledge are ignored. In both these cases, in the Oklahoma City bombing, as well as what happened on this 11th day of September 2001. Yes, the science is ignored, and the cover story continues to hold up. Building 7 is, of course, the smoking gun for what happened on September 11th. I've got a copy of the official report, and Building 11 is not even mentioned. In most of the 50 states, a building the size of Building 11 would be the tallest, biggest building in the state, in most of the 50 states. If Building 11 had gone down on September 10th by itself, it would have been the worst property crime in the history of the country. That's how big Building 7 was. Completely ignored. It wasn't hit by an airplane. It had a few little fires going that your local Boy Scouts or maybe even Cub Scouts could put out with CO2 fire extinguishers. And it came down within its own footprint, straight down, despite having no fires of any consequence and not being hit by an airplane. It's just, it stretches credibility to the breaking point that these people in these positions can keep a straight face when they talk about this stuff.
Absolutely. And with pertaining to 9/11, there's an article out that says the ISS will be releasing footage for the first time of what they captured from space of the devastation of New York City after the towers collapsed, and I might even have recorded the attacks, I'm not sure, or the second attack on the Second World Trade Center building. And the astronaut commented,
how convenient is that?
And they said that it was so odd the way that the smoke was coming. They said it didn't look right the way the smoke was coming out of the bottom of the buildings while it was still standing. And, the planes hit higher up in the buildings. He said it didn't look right. I'll have to pull up the article and find the exact quote. But, yeah, they're going to be releasing the full video of 9/11 attack captured from space to be shown for the first time.
Well, that's amazing. And why they had to wait till 2014 to release something that happened in 2001 is beyond me. I interviewed Dr. Judy Wood on this topic, and she makes some good points. I don't know that, she speculates that weapons exist that we don't know exist, energy-type weapons, which may very well exist. But some of the things she points out, for example, the only file cabinet found was one file cabinet from the basement. I think it was an ice cream shop, a steel file cabinet from those buildings.
Yeah, a passport fell out of the hijackers.
And the passport that was found. And where are the engines from the airplanes? Good grief, And the whole thing about what fire can, and I'm always amazed that people don't know that all jet fuel is kerosene. They don't know that. They think that jet fuel is some kind of exotic substance that burns at extremely high temperatures. All it is kerosene. That's all it is. And it can burn 1,200 degrees Fahrenheit, give or take a few degrees, and it can't burn any hotter. It doesn't matter what you do. It's just kerosene, and it can't melt steel. It never has, never will. I do the following, gentlemen. I say, offer your local welder. Most neighborhoods will have a welding shop within a few mile drive. Offer the owner of the welding shop the following. Tell him you'll pay off the mortgage for a shop in his house and send his kids through college if he can melt structural steel with kerosene.
Yeah, and there are pictures.
Make that offer. Yeah, make that offer. Seriously. He'll look at you like you got two heads.
And to prove your point, there are pictures before the towers came down of people standing in the holes the airplanes left after the fuel burned off.
Right. Well, that fuel basically exploded and was gone almost instantly. And what have you got left? Fire-resistant carpets, fire-resistant curtains, fire-resistant furniture. All commercial furniture is made fire-resistant these days. Paper, none of which, if they burn at all, are going to burn very hot. Certainly not enough to affect structural steel. It can't happen. It can't.
No, you're absolutely right. And if we can get your opinion, I've seen a lot of people make reference to the symbolism of the bringing down of the two towers and the resurrecting of the one tower. And I think Jonathan Kahn on YouTube, I think that's his name, or Jonathan Kleck, he made the case that it was Satan saying the two seeds, God's seed and the Satan seed, are no longer separated. They're together. And Obama signing the beam and the prophetic utterances by John Edwards and John Kerry, I believe, were the two politicians. It also is so symbolic and in your face, or some could say, you're reading too much into it. But for me, it's a conspiracy of the highest level, and it seems to be just as evil, if not as more evil than what it appears to be.
Well, other than John Kennedy, is there any president? There may have been one or two others who were not a 33rd degree Mason.
That's a very good point.
Catholics are prohibited from being Masons, by the way, in case you don't know.
Right. But so are we looking at this? So what's your overall opinion? For example, we just saw John Lear come out, the son of the Learjet inventor, saying that, hey, no planes hit the World Trade Center.
I read his article, and if they found the engines from those airplanes, they would drag them out and put them on display. They didn't, and those engines would survive any kind of disaster that happened on that day. They're very tough. They're well made with steel and so forth, and they wouldn't burn up. There's nothing there to burn them up. So I don't know what the technology would, holographic technology. It's kind of baffling to me how they could make it appear to be aircraft and have the sound of the jet aircraft also. That level of technology is beyond anything I comprehend. I can see how they can make a hologram, but where the sounds of the jets would come from, it's just beyond me. But I certainly don't know everything.
Well, just the evidence by itself, just what you mentioned about the kerosene and the steel and melting steel, and we interviewed Dr. Judy Wood as well, and she made some excellent points. Of course, these are, as we do, bring up questions. She brought up questions, put them out there. Where did the towers go? You had pulverized concrete. The metal's gone, basically, most of it anyway. What did happen? I'm sure we could all agree that whatever happened on that day did not happen in the way the commission report, 9/11 commission report,
Absolutely.
said it happened. So,
absolutely.
We know we've been lied to. We just don't know the extent of the lies, but we know the results of the lies, and that's where we're at today with the police state that we've got. And this brings me to another question here. Annie O.S. Right. Annie, well, she said go ahead and use her name. Annie Osage wants to know, hi, Annie, wants to know your opinion on the current state of the police state with particular respect to the ammunition purchases by the federal agencies, various federal agencies. What do you make of that?
Well, in my opinion, they're buying up the ammunition so we won't get it. They were successful for most of 2013 with centerfire ammunition and .22. By the third quarter of 2013, the small manufacturers of centerfire ammunition were picking up the slack, and there really is no shortage of centerfire ammunition right now in most of the country. .22 caliber ammunition is very difficult to get and very expensive when you can find it. I've had private sources tell me in confidence that the government is both buying it, stockpiling it, and destroying it. The agenda there may be to destroy the gun culture itself, because most youngsters, when they begin shooting, start with .22s. The military considers the .22 long rifle a lethal round because it will penetrate a 3/4-inch piece of plywood at 100 yards. That's their definition of lethality. So it is an effective round, an inexpensive round, a lethal round, and my goodness, gentlemen, it is very difficult to get your hands on it for any kind of decent price at all.
So this is backdoor gun control, is what you're saying.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You're going to start seeing sales of .22 firearms start to slip, because why would you buy a firearm if you can't get ammo for it?
That's very true. You've got a nice small bat to use, and that's about it, or a small baton to use if you don't have any ammunition. And we saw the closing of the lead smelting plant, the last one in the United States, and I don't believe that was accidental or coincidental.
That was EPA. I went to high school in that town, Herculaneum, Missouri, by the way. They started smelting lead there almost 2 centuries ago, and it was the last remaining lead smelter in the country that I'm aware of. So yes, the EPA was doing what they were told to. The lead company there had been complying with EPA mandates for decades and they finally got to the point where they just couldn't afford it anymore.
And of course, that's by design. My goodness.
Absolutely.
We're going all over the place here. We got Alan R. wants to know, John Moore, what do you think the intent of Obamacare is? What's the objective of Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act?
I kind of funny that they talk about mandates. I never got a letter from the government about Obamacare. Did you, Doug or Joe?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did, John.
You did?
I did.
From the government or from
no, from a private insurance company. Let me be clear. Yeah, I was from a private insurance carrier that canceling my insurance because
transitioning.
I'm sorry. Yes.
Okay.
Man.
Well, how can you have a government mandate to do something when you don't give notice? There was no notice from the government to anybody that I'm aware of. Private insurance, yes, but no notice from the government. It appears to be an effort to put private physicians who are in private practice out of business and have them associate with really big groups and take away their independence. I don't use the traditional American healthcare system myself, and I'm glad that I don't. I don't consider it healthcare. I consider it patient maintenance is what they do. They do maintenance of patients. I don't want what they have to offer. I don't need what they have to offer other than trauma. If I have an accident, yes, there's no place I'd rather be than the modern American emergency room. But what they call health care, I want nothing to do with. And we have one of the unhealthiest, or are we 40 from the top in terms of the overall health of our population compared to other countries?
Yeah, 46 or something like that, yeah.
So why would somebody embrace that? It's a broken and defective system that doesn't do anything except diagnose symptoms and prescribe pharmaceutical products to make the symptoms appear to go away. I don't call that health care. I really don't.
No, and it's so convoluted now. They don't even know if the people that are signed up, if they've paid. They're signing up, illegal immigrants. They have canceled so many people's active insurance. And it is, as you said, to move toward a universal health care system. And it's going to not only entail health care, it's going to have the economic factors involved. It's going to be all-encompassing. And it is as they say in their own words, a move towards a single-payer universal health care system.
Right. Well, their ultimate goal is to eliminate people doing what I've done most of my adult life, which is take responsibility for my own health and stay healthy. They want to eliminate people that are wanting to do that, I believe.
Oh, okay. Very good. Now, Larry R. wants to know this. He writes at the beginning of the program, John spoke about survival and preps and mentioned, of course, he mentioned about the space blanket. I'm paraphrasing here now. What do you think, and he wants to know what you think is the most important, if you had one piece of advice to give to the people in America today or the people in the West or anyone listening to this program, what's the most important survival tip you could give people, or a series of tips you might give people?
Focus on skills. Obviously, spiritual preparation is first and foremost. But if you're a group of 6 people or a group of 600, the 2 skills that will be in the highest demand and lowest availability will be the following 2 skills: communication, ham radio skills, and first aid medical skills. I'm working with my local mayor, chief of police, fire chief, head of the paramedics. We're into our 3rd year now of preparedness for our little community. And the first thing we did 3 years ago was identify everybody in the community who has had a ham radio license and had any kind of medical training whatsoever: nurses, doctors, dentists, dental hygienists, paramedics, EMTs. Identify them and reach out to them. If there's an earthquake or a tornado, would you be willing to help the community? And without exception, they all agreed to help. But if you don't have those skills, I would encourage you to get one or both of those skills so that you can help your group, whether your group is 6 or 600.
We're not going to survive what's coming and what could happen. We're not going to survive this alone by ourselves. We do need to organize in groups, don't we? We need like-minded people.
Yeah. I call it the island concept. Me and my family against the world. That's a prescription for disaster.
Exactly. Yep.
Your first responders in normal times will be your first responders in a crisis also. Your local firemen, your local paramedics, your local cops. They're good guys and good women who want to do the right things for the right reasons. And in these small communities outside the city, they will come together and take care of their own.
Well, we need to prepare now while there's relative calm. Don't wait until a crisis hits, folks.
Well, that's too late. That's too late.
Exactly. Well, John, I'll tell you what, we're up against the top of the hour. You've been such a gracious, you're so gracious with your time. Let's close this out. Why don't you tell people about your radio show, give your show a plug along with your website. Tell people what you talk about and how people can listen.
Okay, well, my show is on Republic Broadcasting Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Central Time. We have YouTube archives that are archived. There's a link on my homepage, thelibertyman.com, top right-hand corner of my homepage for the YouTube, which most people listen on YouTube, by the way. We talk about every Tuesday. We have a medical expert every Wednesday. I try to get my friend Professor James McCanney talking about all the things that he's interested in. Thursdays, we have my friend Tim Spencer, who's my IT guy and a submarine veteran, and we talk about various geopolitical matters and a wonderful device, the second half hour, called the Energy Cleaner that helps people be healthy. Fridays, we have my friend Ann Morrison. Ann is a scientist and engineer. We talk about a myriad of things: earthquakes, tornadoes, volcanoes, flu epidemics, radiation events, and so forth. Mondays, I leave open for guests to appear and talk about a myriad of things also. Whatever that guest may have on their mind. This coming Monday will be a guest who has access to some confidential information from the Department of Homeland Security. So that's my show, and that's my website, thelibertyman.com. Wow.
Just to be clear, this coming Monday, the 10th,
right.
Your show, you've got a guest coming on that's got some inside intel from DHS.
Right.
Okay, wow.
Precisely.
All right, folks. So that's going to be a fantastic show to listen to. I'm going to listen to that show, definitely, without fail. John, I want to thank you so much for being a guest on our program. I want to say that you've got a lot of support. You're very popular out there based on the emails I've been getting. I want to thank you so much for appearing on our program.
Thank you, gentlemen. We'll do it again whenever we get the schedule set up.
Absolutely, my friend, and thanks for being so gracious.
Looking forward to that.
Yeah, let me just tell people what we're going to be talking about, if you don't mind, on Sunday. Compromise is going to kill us, and from the politicians to the pulpits, compromise is being disguised and presented as tolerance. Don't we see that today? Tolerance, however, applies only to people and never to truth. So think about that. And Bishop Fulton Sheen, I'm quoting from him, and I know that there's controversy surrounding people and messengers, but the message, think about this. He writes, tolerance is an attitude of reasoned patience toward evil, a forbearance that restrains us from showing anger or inflicting punishment. And he writes also, tolerance applies only to persons and it is for tolerance. It is not. It's suffering from tolerance. Tolerance of right and wrong, truth and error, virtue and evil, Christ and chaos. Our country is not nearly so overrun with the bigoted as it is overrun with the broad-minded, and I would add brainwashed in there as well. But Stephen, Pastor Langford, will be talking about our world, the prophesized rule and reign of the Antichrist through the New World Order. The nominal church will forsake the Lord Jesus Christ in mass, and we're going to be talking about how to overcome. How it's going to be both. It's going to be both eye-opening and uplifting at the same time.
Yes, it is, and I want to tell you, I didn't get a chance to say this before the show, but I did upload a 6-minute clip from that Mike Malloy, the Republicans are the origin of bigotry, where it's not even Republicans he talks about. He starts off with Republicans, but it's the Christian hateful bigots, the and I'm quoting him. He says, who listen to their bastard God, his words, and it gets much cruder, and talks about how it is hateful, and you are basically intolerant for not going along and accepting homosexual marriage in this country. And he goes on to say, if you're a pastor and you don't want to marry homosexual couples, well then don't. There's no issue there. Completely overlooking the fact that churches are getting sued and getting discrimination lawsuits. He makes his point.
The pastors are, to be clear,
right,
yes.
In his, we don't have to play the clip, but it's a complete opposite. What he's saying is, don't be intolerant of how other people live. At the same time, he is completely intolerant and even furthermore hateful towards the people he views as intolerant. And we talked a little bit with Trust Isdar last night about how the worldview of Christianity is so different from what true Christianity is. And that's one of the reasons that they can attack Christianity the way they do, because regardless of their level of understanding of it, it's just of what they see from the people who call Christians.
Very well. Yeah, if you've ever listened to Mike Malloy, that's perhaps he's exhibit A of contradiction.
And we can play that clip.
I heard that clip. I don't know. My goodness. Well, you'd have to buckle your seatbelts. Maybe the first 2 minutes of it, just to give people an idea. See, this is what we're facing out there. And people will say, well, why play such a awesome or awful clip, awesomely awful clip, perhaps? Why play that? Well, you've got to understand what we, as talk show hosts now, are dealing with, the type of people who are that we're doing battle with on the front lines. When you're disconnected from, for example, other media, we're not. And a lot of times you don't understand. People don't understand. They say, "Well, I don't really get why there's this hatred." Well, if you listen to, let's play like 2 minutes of this. If you understand why, for example, or understand what these people are hearing by the likes of Mike Malloy, this despicable human being out there spreading hate, himself spreading hate, the very despicable Mike Malloy spreading hate, spreading intolerance, maligning, and that's at the very least maligning Christian God, then you'll understand what we deal with and what others are being subjected to and falling under in terms of what they're listening to is actually driving their actions. This is the hatred that's brewing in this country. So, yeah, go ahead and play 2 minutes of this, and we'll stop at 2 minutes into it.
The first 20-some seconds is music. I'm about a minute ahead. I have earbud in one ear.
Okay, all right.
But let's see if this plays here. And we do not obviously endorse anything this man says. So
here 21 past the hour. Another reason I bring this up a lot, aside from the self-evident violation of human rights and legal rights and constitutional rights and the violation of just a decent attitude toward our fellow citizens. There's another reason I bring it up. What these right-wing devils have figured out, they have focused on this one area, gay marriage, because for so long in this country, as you well know, homosexuals were the ones that were targeted. Native Americans were targeted. Black folk were targeted. Irish were targeted. Jews were targeted. Italians were targeted. Gay folk were targeted. It's just a steady progression of people who are attacked and belittled and denied their dignity by, for the most part, Caucasian Christian lawmakers who were men. Sorry if that offends you. That's the truth. Who was it that had the power to make the laws that resulted in this kind of bigotry. Bingo! So, swine like Ted Cruz and Mike Lee have figured out, and it didn't take a rocket scientist to figure this out, that the soft spot in these Christian fundamentalists is what it has been for 200 years. And that is the homosexual person. They can't go after the racial prejudice, not overtly anymore, and get votes, but they can go this way. So the right-wingers, the neo-fascists in this country, they figure out, okay, where's the soft underbelly of these stupid-ass Christian fundamentalists that we can take advantage of and get votes? Aha! Gay people. So the political expediency involved in picking a target, just like the Nazis did with the Jews, it's the same goddamn thing. The same thing. The same thing. To pick somebody, to be your target, and then to try to drum up your fellow crazy people to support this bigotry, this asinine attitude, this hate-filled attitude. And these people call themselves Christian? Christ worshipers? Aye. So this is where this anger comes from, that I have. It's part of this whole fabric of destruction that the religious bigots are trying to bring down on this country. It's and they use the language of the left. They use the language of progressives and people who believe in human rights and who are willing to struggle and in some cases die for equality under the law. They steal the language and twist it into this misshapen, nasty attack, in this case against gay people, and then justify it with their holy texts. That's what pisses me off. I mean, really.
All right.
And then they weave it into their political...
Hold on, just another 10, 15 seconds here.
All right.
Excuse me. Their political platform. And then they take it out and sell
it
to these bobble-headed freaks who will show up Sunday morning and sit in their pews and open up their songbooks and think that they're worshiping Jesus Christ, who no more gave a damn, according to anything that's been written about him, about whether or not a person was gay or not gay. It didn't matter. He talked about love, brotherly love, accepting people for what they are, following a golden rule that is 10,000 years older than Jesus Christ. But we'll sit there and listen to these hate-filled, respectable pastors in these mega churches and not so mega churches. Well, don't vote for candidate A because, you know, he supports killing babies and he supports homosexuals. I mean, this is so twisted.
And I'll end it there. It does get worse and it goes on. And as I wrote in the chat, and I talked about this after I heard this the first time, I was shocked as I was driving. And I had this on. And I heard this. And I could not believe what I was hearing on the radio. And doing further research, there is no shortage of clips of this man proving his point of the intolerant, bigoted, hateful Christians, in his word, by being intolerant, hateful himself. And this is the, main area where people just don't understand. They mentally walk away or leave. If you're a Christian, I know that is cringing to hear that, to hear what he said, and you don't want to listen to it. At the same time, we need to understand what is being reported, what is being spewed out over the airwaves to people who are basically in a hypnotic state and absorb it as though it were truth.
You know, if you remove, for example, the references to the political left and the political right. What he's doing is he's attacking Christians. He's attacking Christianity. He's attacking the moral fabric of our country. And folks, people are listening to this. People are listening to him. Well, I don't know, maybe 50 or 60. I think he's on 13. Oh, he's on Sirius Radio.
Yeah, it was on MSNBC.
Okay, and few people can really put Ed Schultz and Chris Matthews to shame, but certainly Mike Malloy, in terms of his vitriolic hatred of all things Christian and all Christian people and Bible-believing people, certainly does just that. And before I get tons of emails about this, just understand. We're looking at this, what I would term this rabid, diseased individual, this rabidly diseased mind of Mike Malloy, this vitriolic hatred that he's attempting to say, in my view anyway, he's attempting to say that we must tolerate sin. We must tolerate, not only tolerate, but we must celebrate, and we must give special rights to those people who are the antithesis of our beliefs. We must compromise our belief system just to make sure that the homosexual community and those who are in favor of abortion are accommodated. And that's what Sunday is going to be about. And that's a good segue into Sunday. So that's...
And, it is important to understand that because of what the scriptures, what God warned about, what Jesus talked about being deceived through vain philosophy, through, your own pride and imaginations and your fleshly carnal mind. We have to understand that there are, as it says in the Bible, precept upon precept, line upon line, here a little, there a little. We have to apply that to our in our spiritual growth and walk with the Lord. Otherwise, we're going to be as ignorant and deceived as most of the rest of the worldly Christians are of what the Word of the Lord says, as these hateful commentaries will just continue to grow, and they're just going to continue to get worse, and it's going to get to a point where you won't even say anything or put an opinion out one way or another. But if you are a believer in Jesus, you will be hated and you will be attacked, and then you will be killed. That will happen, as the Bible says.
Yeah, exactly. So just be aware of what's out there. Just be aware of what we face. The vitriol, the hatred, the attempts to redefine marriage, the attempts to redefine morality in all areas. Just be aware that these despicable people are out there attempting to infiltrate our they have infiltrated our society, our churches. They're ripping apart American families. They're ripping apart the structure, the religious structure of America. And it's so important to understand what we face, the battle we face, and who is spreading these. Identify the people who are spreading this hatred. And so it's not for naught that we had you listen to that. That as well, that could reflect a lot of emails, and that was not even the worst part. The worst part could reflect a lot of the emails that we do get, and some of the messages we get with respect to our Christian point of view. All right. That said, the headline on Drudge right now is a Boeing 777 with 239 people aboard has gone missing. A Malaysian airline loses contact with a plane en route to Beijing from Kuala Lumpur. Apparently, this Boeing 777-200 aircraft had 227 passengers, including 2 infants, 12 crew members on board. The air traffic controllers have lost contact with this airline, and it doesn't sound good because what they're saying is the next of kin of the passengers and crew are being contacted. Now, we are getting different conflicting reports as to the fate of this aircraft. We don't know with precision exactly what happened to it. It was scheduled to land in Beijing at 6:30 in the morning. Of course, we're dealing with difference in time zones here. So Malaysia Airlines said search and rescue teams had been activated. Could this be? What could this be? Where does this fit into the scheme of things? We don't know. We're going to keep our eyes on this for sure. And also one more thing, too. In case you are not aware of this, there has been this Stuxnet-like release of this cyber snake across Ukrainian internet networks, across the networks in Ukraine. It's a very aggressive cyber weapon called Snake. It's infected dozens of Ukrainian computer networks, particularly government systems. It's been one of the most sophisticated attacks. It's being described as one of the most sophisticated attacks in recent years. Now, the reason this is important, folks, is we do know that we know the Western intelligence services have this capability. This is not somebody in some pajama-clad young man in somebody's basement, his mother's basement, doing this. This is warfare at a nation-state level against cyber systems. You've got to understand that the situation in Ukraine, this is a cage fight. I would direct everyone back to, when was it, Joe? Monday, I think it was, when W was on and talking about Ukraine, but maybe it wasn't Monday. I'm going to isolate that sound clip and put it up.
Second hour on Monday.
Second hour on Monday. Okay, thank you. But this is an attack against the Russian ruble again. Well, I'm sorry, attack against the U.S. petrodollar. Don't forget. No, let me rephrase that. What's taking place here is an asymmetrical attack against the energy supplies out of Russia. Okay, and this, of course, the backlash is going to be, of course, an attack on the American dollar, the U.S. dollar, the petrodollar. People haven't been paying attention. This was in progress since before the Olympics began. This was in progress back. The situation in Ukraine has been in progress for quite some time, going back into last November. But things are ratcheting up a little bit. Now, don't forget, there were 4 attempts to get us into Syria. When that didn't happen as intended, Ukraine would have been like a 1-2 punch combined with Syria. The Black Sea is kind of at stake here. If you look at a map, and I would urge everyone to look at a map. Look at where Ukraine is in relation to Russia, in relation to Crimea. Look, of course, at the Black Sea, Georgia, and the stands, and of course Turkey. How Turkey is to the south of Ukraine across the Black Sea, and understand the geography of the area. Understand that we're seeing some asymmetrical warfare playing out. That Putin has been really played as a rope-a-dope during the, shall we say, up through and including immediately after the Olympics. But now he's really like done a Muhammad Ali. He took every blow the West, NATO, and such could throw at him. Now he's survived all the early rounds in this particular contest, which some people say is a boxing match, but no, not anymore. It's a cage match. It's a cage fight. And as W had pointed out, our side, who's fighting on our behalf? Well, it's the old chicken legs there. What's Obama doing? Every picture you see of him, he's got his chin up, his nose in the air. Well, pride goeth before the fall. And he's displaying this Western arrogance. Now, I am not dissing the United States whatsoever. I'm actually attacking the tactics of Obama. The reality, of course, is that our dear Obama has a glass jaw. Putin has waited. He's taken the blows that we've given him. Now he's fighting back. And what we're looking at here, it's really about Crimea, not Ukraine. Putin sees himself as Russia's John Wayne, and we've got to think back too in history about the fall of the Soviet Union and how that went down, and where we hit the Soviet Union with respect to the monetary supply. Well, that's going to come back at us in spades. Now, was that a good thing about getting rid of communism? Well, yes. However,
what good is it to get rid of communism and then ignore it and let it reinfest?
Yeah, exactly. And this is a very complex subject, okay, in terms of certainly getting rid of communism is a good thing. Freeing an oppressed people is a good thing, but placing them under a different type of oppression is not. So
that's the way of the
New World Order. What's the way of the New World Order? And I saw an article from Henry Kissinger. I don't know whether you saw that or not. Henry Kissinger's remarks about the Crimea situation. Did you see that?
Are you sure if it was Kissinger or a representative named? It was similar to Kissinger. I think I know what you're talking about. Let me see if I can find the article, because I made the mistake too when I read it the first time, thinking it was Kissinger, but it was a variation of that spelling, and it was a representative of a state. It was a state representative, and I'm looking through my history right now. But
no, this was actually published in the Washington Post. It was a opinion by Henry A. Kissinger. Okay. Well, we're talking about the same guy, the Secretary of State from 73 to 77. But in his op-ed piece that was published in the Post, the one thing that he said, which caught my attention, or wrote, leaders, and I'm quoting here, leaders of all sides should return to examining outcomes, not compete posturing. Here is my notion of an outcome compatible with the values and security interests of all sides. And he goes through 4 points. Point number 4, and listen carefully. It is incompatible with the rules of the existing world order. Do I need to continue? Okay. For Russia to annex Crimea. So here it is again. The referencing of the world order, New World Order, and so on. It's interesting that Kissinger has got not only an opinion, but a published opinion and a working aspect in this as well. Don't forget, Kissinger also was involved in advising Obama on foreign policy issues. So people, it's the same old New World Order, or the old world order anew.
Yeah, order out of chaos. They say in their own, from what Paul McGuire references, the Manly P. Halls and the Albert Pikes, they state that the whole inception, the whole reason for America's inception, they call it the brilliant plan of the ancients, that was thousands of years ahead of Christopher Columbus in their dream for a world democracy being started in the American nation to be spread around the world as that form of government in order to bring about the end of the world. And it's their stated goal. And they say that their larger problem and the great challenge is in how to set up a new world order, which ethics firmly established on the foundation of democratic idealism. And it talks about how there's going to have to be complete and total chaos through war. And after that, post-war peace that we will bring in. And they say because man is inherently corrupt, that even instituting a republic form of government, which was what the Atlantean, or Atlantis, as they say, the ancient Greek governments were republics. There were states, and they ended up being what is the term tyrants. That's where that began. It didn't begin with a Hitler-type person. It began with a representative form of government. And their reasoning is that people are basically just running in circles fighting themselves.
Exactly. And I do want to bring up something else, too, that folks, I think we need to understand. I think that it's important to understand. Remember, we had talked about dead bankers. Well, now we've got the Bitcoin young lady with Bitcoin being found with a dead in her apartment back in the end of February. Right now, although 10 financial people connected to the financial industry have been confirmed suicided, shall we say, the number is closer to 20, if not 2 dozen. And many have links to the Forex market connections. If you look at, for example, two different banker suicides, you had the latest one, Lee in Singapore, I believe it was, and Crane. Okay, well, if you go back to Crane and McGee, don't forget JP Morgan. Crane was in charge of trading platforms here in the States, I believe it was, and McGee in London, and both of them talked to one another. So there is this nexus with not only J.P. Morgan, but the city of London as well. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking about with respect to dead bankers and also the crises that we're facing here goes back to 2012. Some people don't remember or never heard of the name Bruno Ixel. Well, he's the London whale. That's the moniker that he earned for the derivative trades that resulted in a major loss for J.P. Morgan Chase. Don't forget, back in 2012, the initial loss was reported somewhere around $2 billion. And V had come on and said, no, that number is exponentially higher than that. In fact, that number is closer to a $100 billion loss. Now, what was lost? J.P. Morgan, according to V, if you remember our program, this is going back a ways. J.P. Morgan used for collateral, Chinese gold. Now, in the fall of last year, J.P. Morgan announced that they were getting out of the commodities business. Well, shortly thereafter, they sold their headquarters in Manhattan, the One Chase Plaza building, having the largest private vault in the world connected to the New York Fed, a building in real estate valued at over $3 billion, sold to the Chinese for $720 million. Remember us talking about this? It was a fire sale price. Why was it sold to the Chinese at such a low price, at a below fire sale price? Well, the answer, we believe, we assert, and V, the guerrilla economist head, was one of the first to talk about this, is collateral. Because J.P. Morgan used Chinese gold as collateral, lost it via the London whale, Bruno Ixel. And this gold fraud is exponentially bigger than the LIBOR scandal. This is all about gold. This is all about, this is what we're seeing. It's all about the resetting of the currency. Do you know right now that 24 of the largest currencies in the world are bypassing the U.S. dollar? Folks, this is a harbinger of economic collapse and things to come. So
yes,
just keep that in mind.
And you were right. Henry Kissinger makes on the Washington Post have a comment up or a opinion piece up.
Right.
And what you're talking about here with this economic, there's formula to the tearing down of society. They being the people who are shaping society, engineer these social calamities. And when they do this, it affects every aspect of society.
Well, we had Wayne Jett on talking about the Great Depression, Fruits of Graft, the book he wrote. That was engineered.
Yeah.
The whole thing was engineered.
And what they are attempting, or what they will do, is transition us, the markets, the foreign policy, from being stable and to uneasy into order through chaos, social chaos. Due to the nature of man, they're going to leave men to their own devices. Probably people expect martial law. I'd be surprised to see any officials or officers in the streets if there was chaos like that, at least initially. And what they'll do is continue to let people take each other out, but however that happens, and then they'll bring in their stability, and at that point people will be begging for stability. They'll be begging for peace and solidarity, and they'll put aside the small differences. And when you're in a state of complete chaos, fighting for your life every day, and you're not rooted in Christ, your religion will be a small issue to let go for that order.
No, exactly. And folks, a couple other just bits of pieces of information that you really need to know. I believe you need to know, and I believe are correct. You know, we're not exactly certain when this is going to happen. We're not sure when this is going to happen, but according to all of the financial analysts that have been correct, from V to others, we're looking at a minimum of an 80% dollar devaluation. And, you know, China's buying up the real estate here in the United States, the commercial industry, along with the 80% devaluation of the U.S. dollar. And then, of course, the indebtedness to the Chinese. Well, what are we going to end up with here? We're going to end up with, and I think you've heard V say this before, the guerrilla economist and others, that we're the ones that are going to be making, our children are going to be making the Nike sneakers in American sweatshops for the Chinese. Think about that, folks. Think about that. This is a systematic takedown of the U.S. dollar, in which not only this Obama regime is part and parcel to, but the Bush administration and others have been as well, and going all the way back to the Federal Reserve. And if you think that this is disconnected from what's going on in Ukraine and elsewhere across the world, you're wrong, because this is the establishment of global trade zones. And I'll tell you flat out, this right now, they're getting ready. I mean, well, we're looking at the establishment of 10 trade zones.
I was just going to ask, going back to what you said about making the sneakers, would you really be complaining if jobs were brought back to the United States?
Yeah, for slave labor. We are going to be the slave labor sweatshops for the rest of the world.
Is that better than no work, though? I mean, I know that's a tough question to...
No, it's not a tough question. It's
sitting today.
As far as I'm concerned, you're saying, well, is it better to be out of work and sitting, on a couch with no money, or working as a slave in the field? I mean, no. The entire situation is horrific when you think about it. This is the making of America as a third world country. And I know you're being sarcastic in some of what you're saying. But people have to understand that we look. The United States is being set up to be a third world nation, and who are we going to be beholden to? It's going to be the international banking cartel, and the Chinese and the other foreign countries who are going to be the fiscal presence and the fiscal dominant, the dominant fiscal entity. This is the construction of the one world currency. You're looking at 10 regional trade zones. America is North America. The North America Union, for example, is going to be trade zone number 1. And that infrastructure started with NAFTA. You see the Canadian, U.S. and Mexico region forming.
Well, the original 10 regions, the 10 powers, as the Bible states, are actually from the ancient Atlantis.
Well, correct. But the revised 10 economic regions include, number 1, North American Union.
Right, and you're right with what you're saying. That's how it will be reformulated.
Right, and number 2, Western Europe is going to be the second trade zone. 3rd, Japan. 4th, Australia and South Africa. 5, Eastern Europe, including Russia. 6, Latin America, Venezuela, with Brazil leading, for example. And where is Soros putting his money? Down in Brazil. The oil wells down there. 7, North Africa, Middle East, Egypt. Think about Arab Spring. What did that do? And how did that play into the establishment of these 10 economic regions? The 8th economic region, tropical Africa. Remember the school children that were attacked in Somalia? It's going to involve Somalia, Nigeria, Chad. There's been destabilization in progress as the Pentagon's new map strategy, as we saw with that. The 9th region, South and Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Burma. We know this now as the ASEAN or ASEAN, ASEAN group that's beginning to form. And finally, number 10 is going to be China. So those are the 10 economic regions. And a new government structure is being erected through these global economies. And I go back to, I'll just say this, for those wanting biblical prophetic confirmation of this, knowing how close we are to the end, consult Revelation 17. Revelation chapter 17, verse 12. Consult Revelation chapter 17, verse 17. That just yells conspiracy, screams conspiracy. And then Daniel 7, verses 7 and 8. You want biblical confirmation? There you go. How close are we to World War III? How close are we to the formation of these 10 nations, or 10 economic regional zones? And oh, by the way, in a book published in 1974, who mentioned this? Didn't someone mention this on our show? Mankind at the Turning Point. This is a book published in 1974. I think V might have mentioned this, or somebody had mentioned this, about how this all was going to be, this new world order was going to be formulated.
Yeah,
it's called Mankind at the Turning Point.
We only have 10 minutes left, so I'm not going to read those verses in Revelation and tell you what I think about the meaning as I see it, because we don't really have time, and I want to get a couple phone calls if we can before we do end the broadcast. So let's take a few calls. We have about 11 minutes left, so let's try to get through calls as fast as we can, so we can get maybe 2 or 3 in. 832, you're first. We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, Doug. Hey, Joe.
Hi.
It's Kevin in Houston. How you guys doing?
Good, Kevin. What's on your mind?
I had a really good question. It's something I was talking to Steve about the other day, and I hope it's not too much off kilter. With a lot of people waking up, and your show being a big part of it, can you tell your guests how to tell who to follow? I get that question all the time, and I guess it's the same thing with people following, whether you're Muslim, whether you're Christian, who's right? And I had that question for you, Doug. How do you tell?
I'm not sure I understand your question precisely.
How do you tell which religion is right to follow?
It's this new waking up. Like, you have your Alex Jones, you have your Steve Quayle, and you have your. I mean, there's so many people. And then like that, I sent you that site the other day. That emailed you that site about the other day about everybody seems to be attacking each other, and everybody seems to want to be on top. It's like it's so hard to follow. With me, it's easy.
Yeah, that's why I would say don't listen to any of them as far as the prayer and the Holy Spirit and the Lord is the only person or the only thing that should be influencing and giving us understanding. Men are sinful by nature, and sadly, even the people that are fighting for the same, goals, to better people, are really actually fighting amongst each other, like as you said, to gain in positions or ranks or whatever. And I don't know the people you listed if that's true with any of them, but it is how the carnal mind is, and that's why we're told not to listen to men, but to only listen to the word of the Lord. And
Kevin, let me just add this here, because I think I can speak to your point. Who do you listen to? I mean, you only have 24 hours in the day, and you can only listen to so many talk shows, so many people. You can only read so many sites. You're limited into what you can do. So you've got to make a decision. Who do I tune into? As Joe said, you've got to seek discernment via the Holy Spirit. Obviously, take it to prayer. But in my view, whatever sits right with you and your spirit, if we don't sit right for whatever reason in your spirit, chances are we're not on target. And the other part of things too, track records. You also have to look at people's track records. Are they speaking? Have they been historically accurate, or have they made outlandish claims? We have to be very careful not to overstate our case, but yet we have to be very careful not to understate the threat. We like to take it as investigators. We can't answer the question for you, but I think you can answer the question, and everyone listening to this can answer the question for themselves. And Kevin, I believe I know our audience is that smart and that intelligent, and I think that it's really a personal decision. Some is personal delivery, some is some is guests, to the range of guests. But all in all, I do believe that the majority of people in the new media are the majority of them have a very the only way to say it is their hearts are pure. The majority of people, their hearts are pure. Their intent is pure. They want to awaken others. Sometimes they get stuff wrong. We get stuff wrong too. But it's whatever your heart, your spirit, through prayer tells you. Does that help?
Absolutely. That was exactly what I was looking for. And you're right. It's the malicious people you can look out for. Even if you make a mistake, your heart's in the right place, and that's exactly what I was looking for.
All right, Kevin, my brother. God bless you. Thank you very much for your call. God.
Have a great weekend.
Yeah.
I think
I'll tell you, man. You're a great caller, buddy. And that's a great question. We do get that a lot. Who do you listen to? And there are people out there eating their own. Folks, please be careful of that. There's so much sandbox behavior out there, childlike behavior. It's incredible. It really is. We don't want to be a part of that.
No, and we do see a lot of it, and we see even a lot of some of the emails we get have no rhyme or reason other than to try to the sender trying to sound important, smart, or belittle one of us for something we may or may not have said. I don't know. It's irrelevant.
Steve Quayle's been right. He's led the pack. In my view, he's led the pack in terms of getting the cutting-edge information out there. Steve Quayle's someone that we listen to. Look at V, for crying out loud. Since day one, since we had him on our show, he's called just about every economic event that's happened. Now compare that to others, and I'm not going to mention others. Just do your own homework. But the one thing we won't tolerate, and we won't become involved in, are any of these childlike spats between others. That this guy said this about this, or this person said. No, you know what? Life is too short. The information is too important. We need to get the information out there and awaken people. We're not going to get involved in any childlike spats with anyone else. So just to let you guys know. And we're not going to get dragged or allow ourselves to get dragged into that.
All right, we're going to take another call. We're going to go to area code, the longest one who is holding dropped off. So we'll go to 631 next. 631, you're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report. 631.
Long Island, you're up. Go ahead, Long Island.
All right. We're going to go to another call, 504. 504, you are up next. You're live, and you'll be the last caller this evening.
Hello, guys. Hello, Doug. Hello, Joe. This is Lonnie from New Orleans.
Hi, Lonnie.
Hey.
I guess there's really not any, about a minute here. I guess there's really not enough time to go into what I wanted to go into, but just,
You got 4 minutes.
I think it's a time frame that's just driving everybody crazy, the uncertainty of this win and just what should I do with my money, and it's just, let me tell you a story real quick. We helped this guy move to go to a Bible study. This guy just started coming to the Bible study, so we just met this dude, okay? So, I have a truck, so we helping this guy move, and we're moving his bed out of his bedroom, and then underneath his bed, there's all this, like, water and canned goods and everything. So instantly I kind of got that he was like a prepper. So I look at him and say, hey, man, I didn't know this about you, man. This is kind of like, and he got this real sheepish look on his face, like he was embarrassed. So later at the Bible study, we started talking about it, and we all had pretty much the same story. 5-6 years ago, we started listening to Alex+Jones and thought this was going to happen tomorrow, and everybody started panicking, and and just he couldn't live with that anymore. So he doesn't prep anymore. So man, I just couldn't live with that constant anxiety and stress, and I was driving myself crazy listening to that dude every day. Same thing with my wife, man. I mean, she almost had a nervous breakdown. This is about like around 2008. When Obama was just getting elected for the first time, everybody thought this was going to happen now, tomorrow. There's going to be martial law on the street. So I think that's what it is right now. It's just I'm sitting on 5-6 years of food here, man, stored food.
Whoa. That's a good thing. I mean, first of all, it's it's not a bad investment. And second of all, just because it hasn't happened yet does not mean it's not going to happen.
And I'll say this, Alex+Jones is very effective, and that is what he does best is people say, oh, he's an alarmist. Well, we live in, terrible times, and the people who get that basic knowledge after they start listening to him need to understand that it's the way he does it, the way he does his broadcast, is to wake up those people that have not been reached yet. It's not to worry the same people every single day,
Caller, let me just tell you this, and because we're short on time here, and this goes for all the listeners. I'm going to tell you something. If you have 5 years of food you're sitting on, if it's long-term storage food and it's good till 2025 or whatever, it's 2030, your investment, you will use that food, I guarantee it. If it's food from the store, you can just eat through it and rotate it. But bear in mind, we have a whole generation of people who are thinking either A, it's not going to happen, or on the flip side of that, B, it's going to happen tomorrow. And when it doesn't happen tomorrow, like you, caller, and others, they get this fatigue, an absolute fatigue, this trauma fatigue, but because, oh my gosh, we're up against it. It's going to happen. And when it doesn't happen tomorrow, it's like you're thinking, well, wait a minute. Maybe I'm stupid for listening, for falling into this trap. Folks,
no.
I guarantee you, it's going to happen. We are going to face some serious troubling times where the economy is going to, we're going to see things that we've never seen or thought possible. Believe me, the people that got on the Titanic thought it would never sink. That's why a lot of the lifeboats were only half full. So this is the time, caller. This is the time that we need to grab each other's hands, walk slowly to the lifeboats, and say, you know what, we have to prepare. But you know what? The boat didn't sink in the first 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 10 minutes. It took a while. That's the same with the United States.